Good morning. Good to see you all. Did everybody enjoy the party last night? When you're a keynote speaker, you have to leave early, so I went to bed at about 10:30, knowing that quite a few would still be going. And is anybody here going to admit to being in room 256? Boy, they had a party. But they were opposite me, and they were going to at least 3 a.m., I can tell you. So if you're in room 256, don't want to put your hand up, that's absolutely fine. I really hope you enjoyed the party. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Guys, we've got a couple of hours together now where we're going to be looking at communication and how that is 100% fundamental to the future success of you as leaders, for the teams that you lead, and for this business called KAO. And so it's a great pleasure to be here. A little bit about myself and my business. So I run the very imaginatively branded named Ashley Riley Communications. It took a long time to come up with that. We're a national award-winning communications agency based in the UK. And we deliver digital marketing strategies and communications, and we deliver video and photography for a number of businesses. My background, as you'll see from some of the photographs before I set up my own business, was I was the director of communications for Stansted Airport, just outside London. Got to do dreadful things like launch new airlines with supermodels from Malaysia. Tough gig, but someone had to do it. And my claim to fame, if any of you are unfortunate enough to see me present, I'll always talk around my claim to fame is my team and I got to look after Air Force One the first time that President Obama ever visited the UK. Not sure I'd be so keen to look after Air Force One today, but let's just part the politics to one side. What we also do, and how I came into contact with KAO, is that we produce a weekly video called The Life of Riley, where it's 60 seconds every single week. We put it out there, it's free to access, where we give the latest research, tips and advice on communications for business. And we're delighted that gets about 50,000 views every single year on social media. But the reason I'm telling you that, one, to try and win your favour early on, is that everything we do in communications is based on research and data-based delivery. So everything I'm going to share with you here is not my opinion, it's proven in research to work. And it's something we talk to businesses about quite a lot now, is that communication and this marketing stuff always used to be seen as a bit of a grey issue, and you're either good at it or you're not. And that's changed. There's been a real growth in people researching communication over the last few years. And we now know that people are not born good or bad communicators. The same as people are not born confident or unconfident. They are learnt traits. And that's what I want to talk to you about this morning, is that whether it's yourself or your teams, whether you think you're a good communicator or you need to improve, it's not a foregone conclusion. It's something you have to work on, and it's something you can work on, and we can learn from the best communicators out there that they're people who have spent considerable time learning to be different, but more importantly, learning to be better. So what do great communicators have in common? And it's just to repeat some of the things that I've said to you there. So we know that effective communication is not innate. It's not something you're born with. A baby isn't born and they say, oh, he's going to be a good communicator, isn't he? Nobody says that. It's a learnt trait. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'm a really good communicator, good for you. If you sit there thinking, I find it a bit challenging, that's okay. But you can work on it. Absolutely, you can work on it. And much of this session this morning will be encouraging you to get out of your comfort zone, getting you to think a little bit differently. I could always ask for a show of hands. Nobody ever admits this, but last night when we all came to dinner and we were put with different people, a bit out of the comfort zone, wasn't it? I was walking around and I heard people saying, if you move up, I can fit in next to you, and then if she doesn't turn up, I'll sit there. And it's a great example of just, guys, we're adults, we're coming for dinner. Can we talk to somebody new? I found it, I was going, what am I going to say? I don't know. But it shows how we're uncomfortable getting out of our comfort zones, and it can be exactly the same with our team members. But we also know that if we're going to improve this, that passivity was and is not an option. You cannot choose to do nothing on this. If you do, You won't just continue doing things the same way, you'll go backwards. Again, research tells us that even a successful business doesn't continue to be successful just because it repeats the same things. So the most successful businesses in 2018 know they have to change in 2019 if they're going to be continually successful. It was great to see the awards last night, and hats off to you guys that won, but that's not a done deal. You've got to improve again next year, and you've got to improve again. And so as leaders, your role is to take responsibility for being the drivers of that change. You cannot just wait for it to happen. You have to be the drivers of change in your team. It's not okay for you to say, well, you know, Tony in my team, he gets it. But Bob, he just doesn't get this communication thing. He just doesn't understand. That's not okay. That's your responsibility to change that. And we're going to show you how we can do that. And so we know, again, because research tells us, that great success and great communication are equal partners. And the reason why I've got those two pictures up there are obviously Michelle Obama and Richard Branson, two people who I'm sure you'll agree are really good communicators, but they're also people that talk quite openly about the time they invest in their teams and the times they invest in making sure that their teams are good communicators. Richard Branson takes it a step further. He says the most important people to Virgin are not customers. The most important people to Virgin are the staff that work for him. I think it's a message for all of us. And Michelle Obama, who's become very front and centre recently, also has a massive team around her. And she talks quite openly as well about, yes, she loves being on stage and talking, but she's got a team behind her. She's got a team who she has to invest her time and her commitment. And she talks quite openly as well about she can't be passive in their development. So we know the evidence is out there, guys, that great communicators have an awful lot in common. And so just to phrase it, a globally successful business in 2019 must have a culture of great communication at the heart of everything it does. But it cannot and must not leave it to chance. Just the same as if you're managing the accounts. You don't just go, well, perhaps we'll get to that next week and see if the figures add up. Nobody ever says that. So why do we do that with communication? Why does it so often get left? Well, the answer is it shouldn't and it can't. To move on how we start to address that, I want to show you a very short Obama video. I haven't mentioned. I managed his aeroplane the first time it came into the UK. I'll mention that a couple of times. Well, here's a video. It runs about a minute and a half. Have a listen and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Here's the interesting thing that happens when you're president. Or when you go through the experience of being president. So you start off, you know, you're a community organizer and you're struggling to try to get people to recognize each other's common interests, and you know, you're trying to get some project done in a small community, and you start thinking, okay, you know what, this alderman's a knucklehead, and you know, they're resistant to doing the right thing, and so I need to get more knowledge, more power, more influence so that I can really have an impact. And so you go to the state legislature and you look around and you say, well, these jamokes, I mean, not all of them, but I'm just saying, you know, you start getting that sense of, this is just like dealing with the alderman, right? So no, I got to do something different. So then you go to the U.S. Senate and you're looking around and you're like, oh man. And then when you're president, you're sitting in these international meetings and it's like the G20 and you got all these world leaders and it's the same people. Which is really interesting. Same dynamics, you know, it's just that there's a bigger spotlight, there's a bigger stage. But I'm only partly joking about that. The nature of human dynamics does not change from level to level. You know, which is why I've been quoted saying this sometimes. Like most of what you need to learn, you can actually just read Dr. Seuss, right? because, there's the story of the Sneetches and like people, the Sneetches have, the ones with stars think that they're better than the ones who don't have stars, and they got an attitude. And then, there's the Lorax who's trying to tell people, hey, don't cut down the trees because then the fish are going to die, right? I mean, it's all pretty much there. And the reason, the way power works at every level, at the United Nations or in your neighborhood, is do you have a community that stands behind what you stand for? And if you do, you'll have more power. And if you don't, you won't.
Great video. I'm sure the people he used to work with really appreciated hearing that. And now he's come out of office. Let's just have a look at the key line that he said for me on there. President Obama said, do you have a community that stands behind what you stand for? If you do, you will have more power. If you don't, you won't. I think there's really important messages for businesses in there. There's really important messages for us as leaders. And if we slightly change the words a little bit, it starts to be completely relevant to the teams you manage. Do you have a team that stands behind what you stand for? If you do, you will have more power and influence. And if you don't, you won't. And if you don't have the influence with your team that you need to have, then your team won't be successful. And it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to do that. So we're going to look at, as we continue to go through this morning, how we make sure that your team stands behind you. And there's a theme to what I'm saying here, because that responsibility is you. It's not the team's responsibility. It's your responsibility. You have to take leadership on this, and we're going to go through how that works. Because that is why you're here. You have to be the drivers of change. You have to be the drivers of change. KAO has to do better together. I'm not just someone that's turned up today and just written all this now. I've been talking to the teams and we've been working this through about the right messages to give you. And however successful KAO has been in the past, and how great it was that people got medals last night, absolutely fabulous, we still have to do better as a business. Because the environment will become more challenging than ever. So we have to change how we communicate. We have to change how we communicate the KAO values. We have to change how we communicate the business strategy. And we have to change how we communicate the corporate goals. We can't just wait for people to get them. We can't just hope that at some point, at some time in our teams, they'll suddenly understand this stuff. I'm sorry to say it again, but it's down to you. It's your responsibility. Now, we saw this before the break, and I think it's fantastic that the organisation has got this, and hopefully this will be familiar to all of you. But most organisations have this. Quite rightly, most organisations have this. But for it to become a living and breathing part of what you do, it has to come alive. It has to come alive. It has to be part of the everyday thinking and the everyday working of your teams. And guess whose responsibility that is? It's yours. It's your responsibility, absolutely, to get this. In the world of marketing where I operate, there's a golden rule. You have to recognise that people need to hear a message between 3 and 7 times before they'll engage with it. So I think I've said it's your responsibility about 4 times now. So it's going to be at least another 3 before you start going, yeah, all right, we get it. Absolutely, we get it. So I'm just going to keep repeating that as we go through. But those things about principles and culture and mission are, of course, really important. And when the guys did the presentation before the break, I watched it at the back. It's fantastic. I really like those videos. They're really powerful. But we can't just wait for our teams to get them. So we have to look at those KAO values. And the first KAO value for me, with you as leaders, you have to question yourself on this. And I'll be as bold as to say you've got to question yourselves right now. Have you got the right attitude? Have you got the right, not your team, have you got the right attitude? It's okay if you haven't, but you've got to change that. You've got to change that. And the attitude is, you are the one who is responsible for leading your team forward. Why? Because the business needs to grow, and the business will only grow if your teams are successful, and your teams will only be successful if you're leading them. And that's down to communication. So we look at these issues, and again, they were mentioned before the break, weren't they? Entrepreneurial thinking, risk-taking, team players, high performers. They're easy things to say, aren't they? But just sit there and reflect for a few moments. Is that your team? Is that how your team are? The good news is, if that is your team, it's great because they're getting it from you. The frustrating news, if that's not your team, they're not getting it from you. It's about the fifth time. It's your responsibility. So again, when you look at some of the most successful businesses and the most successful communicators, they have that at the heart of everything they do, but don't underestimate that they somehow find this easy. This isn't easy stuff. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be an entrepreneurial thinker this morning. Most of us think, got to go to work and have a cup of tea and then I can just about get on with it. This stuff has to be worked at. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to be prepared to do different things. And so have you got the right attitude? And if not, why not? And that can be a host of different things to a host of you. And again, it's just a real good opportunity, as you're taking some notes of seeing as we go through today, that if all you take from this session is, why aren't I those things? Then that's a real learning from today. That's something you can take away, that you need to make sure, are you those things? And if not, why not? Because we've said right at the start, those things are not innate. Nobody is naturally a risk taker. I know people say it, but they're not. Risk taking is a learnt thing to be able to do. Same as being a team player, same as being a high performer. These are learnt behaviours. That's what all the research tells us. So when it comes to communicating the KAO business strategy, again, there's questions. How are you developing your team? What are you doing to develop your team? If somebody stopped you in the foyer now and said, oh, hi, good to see you, enjoying the conference, how are you developing your team? Oh my God, what would you say? I've got some notes somewhere, I've got some bullet points. How are you developing your team? Are you consistently communicating the KAO strategy? And if not, why not? And if you are, people are nodding, that's absolutely fantastic. That's great you're doing that. You will be responsible for some of the most successful teams in this business. So good for you. Is your team looking outwards across the business? One of the challenges of big organisations like KAO with different regions is that teams can get very easily focused on the day-to-day tasks. They come in, they've got a job to do, they'll get it done, they'll go home. There's nothing wrong with that, but the business won't grow. So your job as leaders is to get your teams focusing so much more on the bigger vision. Your job as team leaders would be to watch that last session and think, how can I deliver this to my team? Not, I wonder who's going to deliver that to my team. That's not the language of leadership. The language of leadership in communication is, how am I going to communicate that vision that was shared with me with my team? And if the organisation helps you do that as well, that's absolutely a bonus. But it's your responsibility to be able to do that. It's your responsibility for your team to be looking outward across the business. Not because it's a nice to do, not because it's the new funky thing that all businesses are doing. It is key to success. It is key to breaking through that glass ceiling of growing a business to be even better than it already is. And so again, if you're not doing all of those, why not? And my apologies if that comes across a little bit accusational or in somehow that I'm kind of challenging. I am to some degree, but some of this stuff can not be because you're lazy or because you just don't want to. It can be because the rigours of being at work are quite busy. And we've all got pressures. And we've got targets to meet, and we've got things to do, and we've got irritating team members, and we've got people you just think, why do they work in this team? I just wish they'd leave. That's a normal behaviour to have, but unless you start thinking that through and just leaving it and just think, well, okay, it might remedy itself, it never does. You can take complete responsibility for that, and you should. I love this quote from Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel. 90 minutes of your time can enhance the quality of your subordinate, I haven't heard the word subordinate for years, subordinate's work for 2 weeks, or for some, 80 plus hours. Just an hour and a half of your time each week with your team, invest in your team, using some of the skills I'm going to show you shortly, can make a massive, massive difference. And that isn't the team meeting on a Monday morning. That's not, here's the agenda, let's go through, who's doing it, who's on annual leave, okay, who's doing it, needs to go early on Thursday, yeah. That's not what I'm talking about. The quality of your subordinates' work can be enhanced greatly by the quality time that you give them. And again, I'm sure all of you here are incredibly hard workers, but what research is telling us as well about success in the workplace is that gone are the days when the most successful people are the ones who turn up at 7 a.m. and don't leave till 7 o'clock at night. We know, because research tells us, it's now about quality, not quantity. Some of us might think, well, that's easy for you to say, I've got lots of work to do, and you might need to work those 12-hour days. But don't ever think, there's just not enough time in the day to invest in my team. That's not okay, there is. This is not about having to spend hours with them, it's about using your skills really, really positively and constructively. And this, I'm going to flick through these here. Look, these are words you've all seen before. Performance management, talent management, I sound like a textbook now, collaboration, evaluation, quality time, cultural influence, feedback, reflection, strong cooperation, team discussions, employee engagement, career development. Everybody's seen those. How do we make them come off the page? The first thing I always say here, which is really interesting, again, this is research-based, is that when they interview members of staffs, of teams, of employees across the world, these are the issues that staff say are of high value to them. When people across sectors are asked how important is salary to you, 1 to 10, they usually say salary is about a 5. Salary is about a 5, so it's not about people just need to be paid more money and they'll be better. It doesn't work like that. This is the stuff that people say, yes, that's what makes me come to work. That's the stuff that makes me valued. And so again, you have to look at those guys and you have to say, are they part of my team? Is that the DNA of my team? Can you honestly look through that and say we do all of those things? Because it's quite tough. It's quite hard. But again, something you can take away from today, there might be 2 or 3 things in there that you think, yeah, we need to work on that. We need to work on that. But again, I'll say it again, is that none of those things are inherent to a team. A team doesn't automatically collaborate. There's not a natural reflectiveness in any one business place. They're the things you need to work on. They're the things that you have to push forward if you're going to make a difference in your teams. They're the things that have to be put into action. But my job also here today is to give you some advice and some guidance, and then we're going to use some practical examples of how you can make that happen. I love this quote. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So we can give you, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, but if there's not a strategy around it, if you don't have a plan about how you're going to address some of these, just become more noise. Just become more noise. And as a marketing communications business, we bump into a lot of businesses, small and big, who spend hours doing social media. Oh, we need a video as well, and we want some photos. But if there's not a strategy to it, if you don't have a plan for your team's communication and how you communicate with them, this stuff won't happen. So the challenge won't be today, guys, go away and write a communication strategy for your team. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that whatever we're putting up here, and hopefully some of this has pricked on your conscience already, you're thinking, we don't do that, then you need a plan in place about how you're going to address that. It won't just happen. You have to have a plan how you're going to do that. And that plan needs to be based around what you guys need to understand as leaders of KAO. Fundamental importance. Great communication with your teams is your job. Just as you're getting bored of your own message, the rest of the world is just starting to listen. So it's your responsibility. Direction and feedback is your job. My team are not very good at feeding back. That's your responsibility. That's your fault. You need to encourage feedback. You need to move your team's thinking from daily tasks to corporate goals. That's your job. That's your job. Everything you've learned this morning already, it's your job to take that forward. Clarity on performance, on career progression and development of your staff, it's your job. Clarity. People need to absolutely understand that. And so what I'm saying, of course I am, you have to have ownership of communication. It's something you have to take control of. And I'll say it again, not because it's a nice thing to do, not just because, well, we'll get around, because it's key to being successful in the future. My experience, and we'll come on to this in a bit, is it's actually more enjoyable to work around people when you've got a better communication in your team. This is a more comfortable place to be. It's a more enjoyable place to work. And so Susan Ward said that leadership is the art of motivating a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal. In a business setting, this means directing workers and colleagues with a strategy to meet the company's needs, not a strategy to meet your team's needs. That's not what leadership's about. Leadership is about a strategy to meet the company's needs, about what the company believes in, because that's the stuff that people value. That's the stuff that will make people go above and beyond and deliver to the next level. And one of the things that often happens as a keynote speaker is that people will telephone you or they'll email you, will you come and speak to our event? And they say things like, we need you to be really good because we want people to take action afterwards. Can you get a clear message so people definitely do something? And as great or as not great as you may think I am, as soon as I've finished, I can't make you do this stuff. I wish I could. I can come back next year and check whether you've done it. But my message, therefore, is that if you go away after today and go back to the office tomorrow and don't start addressing this, then you're missing a great opportunity. You're missing a great opportunity to make a difference in your team. In my view, start working on this stuff, you will see your team's results and hard work improving within about 8 weeks, minimum. You will see people changing. You will see how people deliver, and it will make you feel better. It will make you feel like your team is going above and beyond. And so what I'm saying to you is that time for change is now. That time for change is now. Because we know, as I've said, communication is learnt, not innate. External factors outside of KAO support this as well. So research is now telling us that individuals desire new challenges in 2019. There's a research company called Mintel who produce some stats at the end of every year, and they talk about what people are looking to do in 2019. And people who work for businesses are saying they want new challenges. They want their team leaders to challenge them to do new things. So you're pushing at an open door because your members of your team will welcome this. KAO isn't expecting you guys to do this on your own. So KAO will support you on this new journey. It's an old-fashioned view that successful leaders don't ask questions. The most successful people, Bill Gates talked about it, Steve Jobs used to talk about it, that they became so successful because they asked lots of questions and they asked for support from people they work with. So if you're looking at somebody going, oh, okay, this is even more work, that's what your human resource and your people development teams are for. They're willing to step up and help you on this, but it's your responsibility to ask them questions. If I can be as bold as to step a little bit out of KAO and into your personal lives, people start to look a little bit worried. I won't ask anybody to stand up. But we know that when people work on their communication in the workplace, their personal life is also enriched. The best communicators traditionally have the most successful and happiest relationships. And again, from the companies we work with and the people development that we do, we know that people who work at their self-development and people that work at their communication skills actually are a lot happier, have more successful lives and have more successful relationships, however you measure success. So understandably, if any of you are having a little selfish gene kicking in and thinking, okay, this is about work, it's going to help you, it's going to help your personal lives as well. It's going to make a massive, massive difference. Great when you go home to your partners. I'm going to be a new person. I'm going to communicate so much better. And so it's time to break through those cultural people heard the word cultural paradigms before? Cultural paradigms is just a really posh word for the way things are done here. It's time to break through the way that things are done in your office. Unless, of course, any of you are getting it absolutely perfectly spot on. And if you are, hats off to you. But it's time to start breaking down the way things are done if they are not working for you. So that time, guys, the time for change is definitely now. And again, it's something, it just reinforces that, this isn't a newfangled view. This is something that Aristotle in his wisdom said, that excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Excellence is not an act, it's a habit. This is stuff you have to work at. This is stuff that takes time to practice. And guys, some of you, you'll try this stuff and you'll fail miserably, but that's okay. As long as you don't go, that entrepreneurial spirit stuff's not for me. I tried it once, didn't really work. Doesn't matter, you have to keep trying this stuff. You have to keep doing it. And so there's a number of skills that I now want to be able to talk you through about how you can start to do that. A number of techniques you can try. So some of these might be relevant, some of them might not. Some of you might think I don't need help with that, but I'd encourage you, if you're taking notes, to keep a record of some of this and give some of it a go. These I'm going to give you bear with me, they're high performance guidance. There's a guy called Brendan Bouchard from the States who does a lot of training with businesses, and we've done some work with this company and drawn these out about this is what works. So the first one that you need to work on is how you seek clarity. How you seek clarity. So with your teams, you need to identify what feeling are you after. That's what I mean by seeking clarity. What feeling are you after in your team? What's the feel you want amongst your team? You don't have to answer that now, but it's something worth thinking about. And again, I get that this is a bit cuddly. It's not black and white. But you have to establish what feel do you want in your team. Because for some, it can be fun. I know if there's a bit of fun in my team, we're much more likely to be entrepreneurial. We're much more likely to be forward-thinking. But you have to establish what you want and work towards that, because it won't just happen. So you have to seek clarity about the feeling you want your team to have. It's your responsibility to raise necessity. What do I mean by raise necessity? I mean you have to increase the expectation of yourself. You have to do that. That's not a choice. That's something you have to do. You have to demand more of yourself. One, because you're able people and you're talented, that's why you're here. But you've got to aim for bigger things. You've got to say, I want my team to deliver. I expect my team to deliver, and that's your role, to be able to do that. So you have to have an expectation of self. You have to generate energy in your team. And I get, again, that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. So my team are not here. I love them to bits. But sometimes, I've got to get them going again. Is that, I've got to, and it's like, Yeah, I'm the managing director. That's my job. I have to do that. I have to step up. And I love this idea. Again, this guy called Brennan Bouchard, lots of his videos are online. They're worth watching. He often talks about that as people and our members of staff, we don't automatically have happiness. It's not something we've just wish my team would be a bit more cheerful. I just wish the workplace would be a little bit happier. Well, that's not going to automatically happen unless you just leave it to whatever the news is going on or what's going on in people's personal lives. You have to generate the energy in your team. That's your responsibility to be able to do that. And does that sometimes mean getting out of your comfort zone? Yes, it does. Does that sometimes mean you've had a crappy weekend and you fell out with your partner and the children are irritating you and your team lost and all of those things? But your leaders, your job is to come in on a Monday morning and generate that energy around you. And yes, that is about getting out of your comfort zone, but it will make your teams perform and it will make you happier. I'm not kind of here as some weird happy coach telling you how to be happy people. Clearly, you're happy people already. But you can't just wait for the mood of your office or the mood of your team to ebb and flow. Take responsibility for that, and you can, and you will see it makes a massive, massive difference. So you have to generate that energy. Increase productivity. Now, that's kind of a basic, isn't it? But it goes back to what I said a few slides ago. This is not about, the best example I can give to my team is get in before all of them and leave when they've all gone home. Because if I do that, they'll think I'm really good. They won't. There's no evidence to provide that whatsoever. Absolutely no evidence whatsoever. It is about having outputs that matter. Outputs that matter. That is what is key. And again, the research is telling us more and more that effective managers with really successful teams often come in after the team have arrived and leave before their teams go home. I'm potentially giving you shorter hours, which might be good news. But if you get the outputs that matter, it is not about 10-hour days. And all of the things we've covered, and I can see lots of you taking notes, that's great. It's about prioritizing those and working on them, because you get this stuff right. You generate energy in your team, and if your team is clear and they get the necessity of what needs to be done, they will increase productivity. They will work harder. They will go towards your team's goals and KAO goals. It's not my view. That's what research absolutely tells us. So chuck out that need to stay before the team, to be in before the team come, go home after. I mean, you might be avoiding going home, and that's fine. That's up to you. But it's about recognizing absolutely what works. You need to develop influence. Develop influence. What I mean, you have to role model the way forward. You have to be the person that you expect your team to be. It's not okay anymore for leaders to say, oh, so-and-so in the team, just a bit grumpy, isn't she? That's not okay. You have to show whatever you see the opposite of grumpy. You have to show the opposite of whatever underperforming is. You have to be the one who is the role model, even when you're not feeling like it. Even when you're not feeling like it. And again, guys, I get that can be tough. And I get at times it's like, do I have to do this again? The answer is, yeah, you're a leader. That's what you're paid to do. That's your job. That's your team's job. That is up to you. So you have to develop that influence. And then the final one of those is that demonstrate courage. And I get that courage can be quite a traditionally masculine word. It's not meant to be about that. Demonstrating courage is this thing about getting out of your comfort zone. Getting out of your comfort zone. I went through it yesterday, and you're gonna laugh. So I got here at 4:00 yesterday afternoon. My hotel room wasn't ready. And so I thought I'd walk into the town, beautiful town, absolutely freezing place here. It's so cold, it's really cold. And I wanted a coffee. And my first thought was, will there be a Starbucks in Mainz? And there isn't. So I kept walking, and there was a lovely coffee shop, and there was a few locals in there, very what looked to me as a traditional German coffee shop. I'm a grown man, I've got children, I run my own business, and I went, I can't go in there. There's McDonald's, I'll have a coffee over there. So I'm not going in McDonald's. I've travelled halfway across Europe and I'm not going to McDonald's. And so I walked back past the same coffee shop again, and I said to myself, grown man again, here we go, I said to myself, if it's empty, I will go in. What's that about? I walked past because it wasn't empty. And I came back to my room and had the sachet of cappuccino in your room, if you all got that, and just stirred it. Oh, it was horrible. Oh, gosh. But it's an example where getting out of that comfort zone can be quite challenging, even on just kind of a normal basis. So why do we find work stuff the same? Because we just go to what's ever comfortable. And again, I know that if I do go out of my comfort zone, I feel so much better for it. If I'd have gone in and done my kind of really strange 2 words of German that I know and kind of felt a bit, and I would have left feeling so much better. I would have felt, oh, come on, the world's a happier place. And I just went back to the room and felt a bit grumpy for half an hour and thought, it's a great example to share with you guys. How you turn that into a business message is, if I ask you to sit there now and just think in your head, what's the one thing you don't like doing with your team? Oh, and you're all nodding. You know it straight away, don't you? Oh, my gosh, yeah. So if you do nothing else when you go back to your teams on Thursday, Friday, or next week, whatever that one thing is that you don't like doing with your team, just challenge yourself. How am I going to address this right now? I'll address that in 3 weeks on Thursday, on the 4th of February. That's not okay. Address it straight away. Even if you don't master it, you will feel better for doing it. Absolutely, you will feel better for doing it. And I'm feeling quite embarrassed that I told you the coffee shop story, because should I have told them that or not? But I shall go after today, before the flight. I'll go in the coffee shop. I won't. Okay, so 6 key points there about how you can become higher performing people. And you may have noticed as I went through that a lot of the encouragement I was giving you was about how you emotionally address this. So we talked about expectation, feeling, things that matter, role model, comfort zone. That's emotional stuff that you have to work on. That is emotional intelligence, which a lot of you will have heard about before. And again, nobody is born with great emotional intelligence. It's something that you have to absolutely work on. So take at least one of those away. We've got a couple of minutes left before I'm going to hand the work to you guys to start working on some things, to start putting this into practice. But before that, what I did want to share with you was the 7 key things that great communicators have in common, because we know the art of communication is the language of leadership. And in the task we're going to give you, you can use some of these things to start helping you to address the problems we're going to be putting in front of you. And we call it the 6 great E's of communication. And again, this is something that was put together in the States, but it's something that a lot of businesses and successful people are using more and more. You have to envision your staff. We've said that. I've said it about 7 times now, guys. If you're not getting it, I'm going to say it again. The team needs to understand the vision of KAO, and that's your responsibility. You have to have your team envisioned. They have to get what it's all about. You have to enlist people in your team. So the good news, again, this isn't you have to do everything. This is about, if you've got 1 or 2 people in your team that are real high performers, that are good at this communication stuff, enlist their support. Get them to work with you on this. Find someone in the business that agrees with you and wants to work with you. Work with your human resources teams. Enlist people's support to do this. We've said already, you need to embody the message in everything you do. The vision stuff has to be a key part of what you talk about with your teams. They have to understand that. And again, that isn't item 9 on the agenda on a Monday. Oh, we need to go on to the vision. How are people feeling about the vision? Okay, that's not what I mean. People have to really understand the vision, and you have to. I would advise, if it's possible, that the presentation before the break, before the coffee, was one that you can share with your teams. I think it's something really positive, but not just once. I think you need to revisit it time and time again. If your teams are saying to you, look, we get the vision thing, that's fantastic. Because it means they're starting to live and breathe. But it has to be embodied in absolutely everything that you do. You have to empower people in your team. We get that. We've covered that already, haven't we? You You have to empower people with some of these skills. Some of the stuff I'm asking you to learn and for you to be better at, you also need to be teaching your team that as well. So again, if I asked you right now to say, well, okay, think of your team and think of the most irritating member in your team, and then think about what is it about them that irritates you? What is it about them that disappoints you? What is it about them that means they don't perform? If you can think about what that is, your job is to guide that person, is to teach that person, is to empower them, is to give them the skills to be able to come out of themselves and change. It won't just happen. Won't just happen. You have to encourage people. Again, this is a journey for your teams. So please don't think for 1 minute that you're going to go back next Monday and say, guys, we're going to go for the vision. I'm going to envision you. We're going to enlist your support, and we're going to have. You're suddenly all entrepreneurial. Be great if you want to do that, but you need to keep encouraging the teams. You need to keep encouraging people. You need to say to them, look, we're being told that we've got to be more entrepreneurial. So come up with an entrepreneurial idea. Well, I haven't got one. Well, think about it and come back to me. And if it's really rubbish, that's okay. That is okay. We have a rule in our business, no question is too stupid to ask. And my team really tried their best to prove that wrong. But it is about encouraging your teams. And it's okay for them to make mistakes. It's okay for them to get this stuff wrong, because they won't do it unless you're encouraging them to be absolutely doing that. And I've got a 3-year-old, Teddy. He learnt to walk ages ago, but again, he didn't just kind of sit on his bum one day and then got up and started walking. He got up and fell over, and we had to go, oh, good boy, isn't it great? You kind of travelled that far. And kids get that. Kids get that encouragement, and so he goes a little bit further. It's exactly the same with your teams. Exactly the same with your teams. I want your teams to fail at this because your job is to encourage them. Nobody has a team that gets this stuff straight away and just suddenly starts doing it. It simply doesn't happen. And then finally, on this slide, of the 6 great E's of communication, you've got to evaluate. It doesn't have to be overly formal. This can be a reflection thing that you do, but you've got to evaluate, where is the team going on this? And that sounds obvious, doesn't it, to you as team leaders? But that can be a bit of a challenge to them, because again, we're busy. We're busy people and we've got busy things to do, and it's just like, oh, that didn't work. Why didn't it? Let's give it another go. Let's keep evaluating what we're doing. So it's about enlisting, envisioning, embodying, empowering, encouraging, and evaluating. So there's some of the key skills we're trying to give you. So it's not just all about tactics. It's not just about going back to work and saying, we have to do this. It's having a plan around that. It's definitely work. We use this one a lot, and we get businesses to use this a lot, but you have to have it readily available. You have to have it usable. Draw on it all the time, use it, print these slides, we can send the slides, print them off and use them and tick them off. Absolutely, you're doing them. Learn that this is a new behaviour.